Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Your Project Shepherd Construction podcast. My name is Curtis Lawson with Shepherd Construction Advisors, and along with my industry expert friends, I am here to guide you through these 4 key components of a successful project, which are demonstrated by this simple drawing of a house. The foundation is proper planning. The left wall is your team, the right wall is communication, and the roof is proper execution. Have all 4 of these components in place and your project will succeed. Whether you're building or remodeling a custom home, or if you're an architect or designer looking for inspiration, or maybe you're just interested in building science and high-performance construction, you're in the right place. Please help us further our mission here by tapping that follow or subscribe button, push that notification bell so that you know when our new episodes drop every week. And now, let's get to today's interview. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Your Project Shepherd podcast. We are so happy that you joined us today, and I'm so happy to have with me today Kathleen Reardon and Susannah Devine with RD Architecture. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we met a year or so ago. I was actually just kind of going through a lot of the architects in the area and just inviting people to coffee and just getting to know different firms and how you guys work. And so you were kind enough to respond and to go join me for coffee. We haven't had a chance to work together on a project yet, unfortunately, but hopefully we will pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was going through and thinking about podcast topics and guests that I wanted to have on, I thought of you guys because, from our conversation that we had that day and just from seeing your work, I love what you do, and I thought that you guys would be great to have on the show. So thank you. And to get started, why don't you guys just tell me a little bit about yourselves and kind of how you got together and started working together and what you guys do?
So, we have been working together for a really long time. Like Susannah and I like to, joke around and say that we are our, longest, relationship. So we've watched each other go through all kinds of different phases of life. We met back in 2007 when I had just started working on my own and I was looking for an intern to help. And I had put a note at the Art Institute because they like to have their students do internships. And lo and behold, one day there was a knock on my door, knock, 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 and there was Susannah saying, "I want to come work for you." And so it's been just a great, design partnership through the years. And now we're business partners, and we, do solely residential design, and just a really great design duo working together on interiors and architecture hand in hand.
And just to be clear, you do architecture and you do interiors, right?
Correct.
Gotcha. So what are I love having both of those kind of from one source because it lets you guys be working on kind of both aspects of that from the very beginning. So just talk to me real quick about, Susannah, the advantages as a designer of kind of being in there early and being involved in that design process. How much better is that than waiting until the end and getting a set of plans?
Well, we start with furniture from the very beginning. So understanding a person's needs for each space and what type of furniture they're going to need in each space is very important and sometimes drives the envelope. And, a lot of times we'll ask clients, what are your favorite pieces of art? What are your favorite pieces of furniture if we're going to do a remodel or if we're building a new home? It helps us understand their style. And they might not even know their style, but picking a few pieces or a few pieces of art that are very key, it gives us a clue what they're looking for, what they're looking towards.
Yeah. And when some people build a house, they want to start fresh with all new furniture, which is fine. Or oftentimes they have some item that's an heirloom or something they've had or that they love or something specific in mind that you kind of have to work into the space because grandma's 9-foot tall Mongolian carved wood cabinet doesn't fit in every house, right?
Right. So The architecture and interiors together is also, I like to say, it's the full experience from curbside to bedside. So many architects or designers, in my experience, don't really take into account what the end user is, how the end user is going to, live in the space. That's very important because we're building it for people. That's what homes are for. That's what they're places of sanctuary. And to me, it's extremely important to have that at the beginning.
Yeah. And Kathleen, on the architecture side, I mean, how important is it to you to be getting kind of that interiors feedback at the same time?
Yeah, so I actually have a degree in interior design, and then I got a master's in
Oh,
architecture.
nice.
So I think my perspective has always been about, the human scale that they teach when you go through an interior design program versus, architecture school is everything from, city planning all the way down to, and you're really geared towards larger scale projects like libraries and office buildings, hospitals, things
Right.
like that. The home is the most intimate space. That is really important to have it be a human scale space so that people feel comfortable in their home. So having an interiors approach, understanding kind of the creature comforts, human comforts part of it is key to having a successful project. Um, and one of the ways that we know this is by working with people who are not comfortable with their homes to start with. And then we want to remodel it and we start asking questions like, where's your favorite place to sit? Where do you go if you don't feel well? Where do you go to curl up with a book or, have a quiet dinner or just those kinds of questions. And if people can't answer those questions, there's a problem.
Mm. Yeah. I think sometimes people come into the process of wanting to remodel or build, and they just come to you. I've seen this. People come with a bunch of Pinterest and house stuff with these beautiful spaces or stuff that they see on Instagram, and then maybe sometimes you look at it and you're like, that's nice looking, but how would you use that? How based on what you're telling me about like how you use spaces, I don't think that would work for you, right?
Right. I mean, it's really important for a house to have a mix of spaces. And so, we're focusing on scale and proportion. And we're also focusing on the idea of refuge and prospect. And so, we're talking through these concepts. We call them, some of our design tools with people to help them think about their project a little bit more deeply. It's, the images are cool and they have kind of an appeal of like the latest trend, or kind of like this wow factor. But we really want people to think about how they're going to live in the space.
We're kind of like detectives in a way, especially when you get such a broad range of inspiration images. We have to read between the lines and go, okay,
Mhm.
what do all these things have in common,
Right.
regardless of style? Or, is it lots of windows and natural light? Is it the idea of the wow factor? Do they just want something impressive when they walk in?
Right.
What is it that they're drawn to? And so we help them determine their own style. And a lot of times that's conflicting when you have couples where one has the grandma heirloom and the other is very modern, So you have to marry those two, and it ends up being a very eclectic, true to that homeowner's style. It's
Mhm.
not our style. We're not cookie cutters. We're not repeating our own style for them. People don't hire us because they want what style we prefer. They
Right.
hire us because we listen to them and we can help them determine their own style.
I think that's always the case where one person or where the two halves of the couple, if it's a couple, have very different opinions and ideas, and the joke's always that we're also marriage counselors on some level, right? But you can't just throw out one person's ideas. You have to find a way to kind of meet in the middle, and maybe that's, hey, you want to keep grandma's special thing, but let's find a place for it to where it fits, it doesn't look out of place, but your spouse is also getting what they want in this equation, right?
Mhm.
Right. So that just goes back to, how interiors can really drive the project. And so, when we start the design process, we usually come up with 3 floor plan ideas to solve the functional problems, to fit the pieces of furniture that need to be in there, just to get the house to work the way somebody wants. And then that 3 floor plan comparison really helps people to think about different ways of doing things. So it becomes a compare and contrast exercise, and then we can kind of mix and match ideas. And so it's a really robust, dynamic process, and we feel like that helps to arrive at the right solution.
Mm-hmm.
And collaborative.
Yeah, it's very
We're
collaborative.
engaging the owners to be a part of the solution.
Yeah. So one of the things on your website, and Kathleen, I think it was on your bio on your website that I liked, and I pulled the quote off here, was it says, "I believe in teamwork during the construction process. Working is needed with homeowners, engineers, contractors, and tradesmen with a no problems, only solutions attitude." So I love that quote because I have found that oftentimes architects and designers will come into a project that's already in progress. You've designed it, the contractor's doing it, and you come in and you're like, this is wrong, and some people just call out, "This is wrong, fix it," right? Well, I've said many times, there's no perfect set of plans, of architectural plans, design plans. There's always things that are left to interpretation, no matter how well you try to plan it. And so coming into those situations with a collaborative attitude is, as a builder, is so much better than someone coming in and just wagging their finger, right?
Right, right. Yeah, when I was first started out as, a very young designer, not an architect yet, I was working on a big bank project, and it was a big project for me to manage in my past life when I did more commercial projects. And I remember the supervisor for that project, there was an issue, and he said, "Don't worry, Kathleen, no problems, only solutions. We're going to figure it out." And that moment really set the tone for me, and also kind of established like the kind of relationship I want with the builder. Like we're all in it together, his way of being calm and just saying, "No, don't worry, we're going to figure this out." That's the way projects should be with the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's always going to be issues with construction, that's just the nature of construction.
Yep.
And we just want everybody around us to know that if there's a problem, regardless of whose fault it is, we just all have to be in it together to figure it out.
Yeah. I think definitely. And so as a consultant, owner's representative, I also see the builders kind of, and I'm sure that you see this too, builders kind of bowing up against the architect. And, that's historically, I feel like this is changing, but historically I've always seen more headbutting taking place and more people digging their heels in and saying, "No, this is the way it's got to be." And maybe it's just me being hopeful, but I feel like that's changing. I feel like the environment of architect, builder, tradesperson, homeowner is becoming more collaborative. I don't know if that's just me reading into it, but I feel like that's happening, and that's what I want to happen, right?
Hopefully. Yeah. And, as time goes by, building, it gets more and more complicated. All the different technologies that we're trying to get to work together, whether it's, a lighting system or air conditioning system, or installing like a certain kind of tile detail or plumbing, it's difficult. And we can't go, building is a kind of based on traditions, traditional ways of doing things. And when you change those traditions, now you have to have more conversations, and you have to have those conversations as a group. So if you can't collaborate, how are you going to make it through the day without losing your mind?
And you have to have those conversations early,
Yes.
because once something's framed, covered up, it's oftentimes too late. So.
Right.
Again, that's why, having the interiors involved on an early phase is super important too, because so many of those items affect how something's framed, how something's, there's nothing worse than getting an interior design selection so late in the process that now we're like ripping things out and doing it again.
Yeah.
Because the homeowner doesn't want to pay that change order later, and it just adds time and cost and mess to the process.
One of our goals during the design process is to have 90% of the selections made before construction, which the goal is to make it as smooth of a process as possible.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of items that either have long lead times, and for smaller projects, it's particularly difficult for a builder to organize and schedule and line up if, a tile is going to be 9 weeks and a tub is going to be 24 weeks.
Especially if it's like a remodel where the whole timeline of the project, maybe it's only 6 to 12 weeks, it's probably not 6, but 9 to 12 weeks, 16 weeks, and certain items are 9 or 10 weeks in and of themselves. Logistically, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, we recommend don't start demo for a smaller project. Don't start demo until everything has been ordered and you've got a good idea of when everything is going to be in, or it's already in. If you've got the ability to store those items, get it stored, get it in, and then you can start, and it's a smooth process.
Yeah,
right. And then also, clients are busy, so we'd rather them make selections on their own schedule before construction starts instead of somebody asking them, hey, we're ready for your shower valve because we're done framing. And they're like, what? Shower valve? Plumbing already? This is the worst 2 weeks of the year for me at work. So we really don't want them to have that kind of pressure during construction. We really want them to enjoy the process.
I think sometimes people don't even realize that small decisions can have big impact. An example that I like to use with clients sometimes is something as seemingly simple and silly as like cabinet hardware. They're like, we'll just pick it at the end. It doesn't really matter. But sometimes it does. When you're laying out cabinets and you've got a cabinet door that's intersecting a corner and you've got cabinet hardware that protrudes a certain distance, and now you got drawers that are banging each other. You can't open something all the way. And it's like, well, if we'd have just planned this out and picked that out 6 months ago, we wouldn't be having this problem right now.
Yeah, that sounds like a story from experience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, all good stories come from, or all good lessons come from that experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I always like to tell people a lot of the stuff that I talk about, the mistakes that I talk about, are things that I've made. In the last 20 years, I've had all these problems.
Yeah, that's what sometimes I think, construction is kind of like baseball. It's a game of failure, but you get a lot of strikeouts, but you get enough home runs that you just want to keep going back and doing it again because it feels so great when you get it right.
You just do 3 out of every 10 projects right. You're in the Hall of Fame, right?
Yeah,
you bat 300, you're in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. Yeah.
Backing up to something that you mentioned a minute ago, and this is on your website, actually, which we'll try to pop some photos on there or for sure link it. But there's a section on your website that says methods, and it talks about some things like exactly what it says. Yeah, sight lines and thinking of the diagonal angles and all those kinds of things. Can we just talk about some of that stuff and talk about kind of what your methods are? So one of the things that I wanted to kind of achieve on this podcast episode was talking about pulling back the curtain of good design and thinking through the methods of good design. So I just wanted to touch on that because I thought that was a great portion of your website.
Absolutely.
So I'll start with sightlines, because we talked about curbside to bedside. So for us, it's the entire experience that a homeowner has from the moment they drive in. They want to, yes, I'm home. I'm in my sanctuary. I get to have a cup of coffee at the end of the night or a cocktail and just relax. So when you imagine pulling up and walking in, and every view, every pivot point where you shift your foot or change your, position, it should all look beautiful. And so to us, those sight lines, are really important. And we often will draw in, long dash sight lines to engage the owners or the clients in like understanding, here's your longest diagonal. Look how long, look how wide and long and big this room looks, or your space looks now. that we've opened this up. Instead of looking into the wall, you're looking out to a window, or you're looking out a window to a beautiful view. So those are all important aspects, and everything to me as I'm designing and I'm drawing things out. I'm imagining myself as the homeowner in that space and like taking a photo, of every view, going, yes, this is really pretty. Yes, this is really pretty. And to me, that's the sign of a successful design, is being able to move through the space and have every view that you move into be a really nice, calm one.
Yeah, and also thinking through like what to exclude, right? And so if you're, I'm thinking of my own house right now as you're talking about this. I'm thinking I've got a big picture window in my living room that looks out onto the street, but yet I don't want my teenagers running around in their underwear out in front of that window for all the world to see. If you're sitting there drinking your coffee in the morning, there's certain things that you don't want to be seeing. So it's thinking about what to include as well as exclude, right?
Yeah, and like one of the things to be watchful for is a lot of homes are really open, so you need to be thinking about, well, what kind of appliances do you see as you walk in and go through? Like, are you okay seeing all your appliances when you walk in through the front door?
Right.
Or views into bathrooms, trying to situate like a powder room, so that if the door is left open, you're not really seeing it from like the dining room or the kitchen.
Or guests aren't uncomfortable. If a guest is going to use that powder bath, they don't feel awkward going into it.
Exactly. And sometimes when you're looking at the plan, just the way our brains process the plan view, it's not readily apparent what those sight lines are.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're processing it as a collection of rectangles that are connected to each other. And so talking about sight lines, I think is a really important awareness for somebody looking at a floor plan to understand what they're going to see in reality. It's kind of like designing a movie set. You don't think about it in plan view. You think about what the people are going to be seeing on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, where the camera views are.
Where the camera views are.
And you made a perfect point as far as the privacy. Privacy is just as important as having that prospect and refuge, right? So, where is the shower? Where are the bathrooms situated? Are there windows? What types of, what's on the other side of that window?
Yeah. Well, and it also changes with who's going to be using the space. If you've got a like, let's say a bathroom where you've got two kids sharing a bathroom, one's a boy, one's a girl, they might want some more privacy. So if it's a Jack and Jill bath, because not everybody can afford to have an ensuite bath for every kid, right?
Right.
So if you have a shared bath, like how are you going to lay that out so it's not as awkward, especially as kids are aging and things like that?
Yeah. Is there a private tub room,
right,
where someone can brush their teeth while another is showering?
Yeah. I think in the open floor plans that are so popular, it becomes even more challenging, right, with the sight lines, because we have all these houses now where you walk in the front door and it's just everything's there.
There's no sense of entry. It just dumps you into the space.
Yeah. And so, that really plays into the concept of prospect and refuge. Prospect being the idea of like seeing a space, like I want to go there. Oh, that looks really interesting, or that looks comfortable. I want to go be in that space. It calls to you. And refuge, so I think that's prospect is kind of the easier concept. I think refuge is the one that people kind of forget about or don't think about, because it's not really kind of like the magazine shot, or it's not like the impressive space.
Mm-hmm.
Refuge is the space that you want to go to when you want to be by yourself or have a cup of coffee. There's also the idea of having a perch. So like recently I was visiting with a potential client about remodeling their home. They had no perch spot in their house, and that would be like a spot at like a kitchen island or a bar or someplace where one person can sit and drink a cup of coffee and watch their kid do homework or watch somebody else cook, or look at their laptop. And it was like, where do you go when you want to do these activities? They just didn't have that space.
Right. I think people don't think of it that way. They don't think of, I think everybody has that spot, right? I mean, even in a poorly planned house, if people don't have that designed in, they're going to create it whether they realize it or not.
Right.
They're going to kind of create. I mean, it's people go to a church, they always sit in the exact same spot. It's the same thing in your home. It's like you subconsciously kind of go to this one spot, and that's your spot.
Right.
I think back to my dad had his spot that he was always
Yes.
at.
Yeah.
So whether you intend to or not, you've got that spot in your house. And I think about my wife. She has her perch in the kitchen to where
Mhm.
she's sitting at the bar and she can kind of see everything that's going on and
Yeah.
monitor it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, kind of a sense of being able to see and control your surroundings. And so those are the kinds of things that we talk about when we design for people.
What else on that? And I don't have it pulled up right now, but what else on that methods section? What other concepts are you guys looking at as far as that goes?
So choreography is the one that's listed, and it's not necessarily about enough space to dance, but choreography is the art of movement, and we move. We're humans. We are built to move, and the space that we create and design should, live up to what we need of it, right? So having enough room to circulate. One example I was thinking of, we have a family of 10 or 11, and, this racetrack effect, anytime that there's, a place where, a kid can ride their scooter if you allow them to ride it in the house, or, to chase the dog, that it's kind of out of the way, it gives that racetrack effect, and there's more circulation to play. So choreography is about the movement of the space and how people move within their space. A very simple, basic example that I'm sure everybody knows by now is the work triangle in the kitchen, right? That's not beautiful movement per se, but it's beautiful when it's efficient and you can, really take care of business in the kitchen efficiently. There's nothing worse than having an island right in the middle of your work triangle, and you have to walk around it to get to the refrigerator.
Go around the island from the stove to the sink, and it's like,
Yeah. And then making sure that we have the right furniture in the plans is really important to achieve that. We want to make sure that it's scaled properly to the space. And, so understanding scale and proportion is another important tool for us. And one thing to note is that everybody seems to have their own sense of scale. And people are not all the same. And so a really great example of this is we had a client who was a dancer. And I was just having, trying to understand her sense of scale and just feeling like I'm just not getting a complete understanding of what's important to her, what she needs. And finally, we went to Restoration Hardware to look at furniture together. So I was like, let's go look at some furniture together because I really want to see what you're drawn to. And we went into the store and there were 12-foot ceilings. And she was like, this is the space that I feel comfortable with. I was like, okay, you have a really grand sense of scale. Like, this is what you need. And that's very different from my own sense of scale. So I have to kind of step outside what makes sense to me and kind of step into her shoes, the dancer's shoes. So that's just think about how you feel comfortable. Is it 9-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings? For her, it's 12-foot ceilings, bigger spaces, smaller spaces. Not everybody's the same.
And Restoration Hardware was perfect segue because there's a petite, a regular, and like a grand or a great. Like they always have, most of their furniture has 3 different scales. And so that's understanding how large of a piece of furniture do you want in your space goes back to, why interior design is really important at the beginning. Because if you're expecting to put a 10 or 12-foot long sectional, we need to make sure that there's enough space in the room for that and there's enough circulation space around that.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's a great commercial right there for working with a professional designer, because how many people go to the furniture store and they see a piece of furniture they like and it looks fantastic at the furniture store. They sit on it, they love it. They put it in their house and they're like, this does not work in my house. Or maybe you go into somebody's house They've got this massive couch in this small room, and you're like, who picked this out, right? So
Yeah.
it's, it's a great advertisement for using these services, right? And
Mhm.
that's why we have designers.
The furniture has to live in the house too, and it needs to be comfortable. Yeah.
I actually pulled up your website while you're sitting here talking, just so I could review what's on this page. The last item that we didn't touch on yet is natural light and kind of the importance of planning for sunlight and the path of the sun through the day and how that affects our health. So can you all touch on that real quick?
Exactly. So, we have 4 different orientations, morning sun, east, south facing, which sometimes we want to protect from that sun, west sun, which for the most part in Houston, because of, it gets so hot, we want to protect from west sun. But I think it's really important to have a little bit of west sun coming into the house at a strategic location to signal the end of the day. And then, of course, the northern exposure, which is wonderful because that's just a nice soft light that does not add a lot of heat gain to the house. So we talk to people about, you know, when you wake up, what do you expect? Do you want a lot of light in your bedroom? Do you want it to stay dark in the morning? Is in general natural light important to your mental health, to your well-being? And some people love a lot of light, but there are also some people who are kind of like keep the curtains closed, want things to be a little bit darker. Um, and then along with that, just discussions about, how much artificial lighting, do we want in the house, and how bright do things need to be? Can we let some rooms get a little bit darker at the end of the day to kind of help ease into, going to bed, going to sleep?
Yeah, those transition times are really important, and I think that's something that gets overlooked when people are planning lighting. In fact, this is something that I kind of fight on a daily basis at my house because so when I redesign my kitchen, we've got our overhead lighting, our recess cans that when you hit that switch, it lights it up and it's great for working, right? The first thing in the morning, it's not what I want to walk into. So my kids have a tendency to walk in and just hit that main overhead switch and go nuclear and light everything up.
Right.
Whereas I walk in the morning, I want some soft light for the transition. So
Right.
I want the under cabinet task lighting. I want kind of the more ambient light, not like the bright overhead light.
Right. Right.
And so thinking through how your lighting's designed and how that affects just kind of your mental state is important as well.
Right. So, it's like we're so used to having all of this overhead lighting as, our artificial lighting. But, capturing that morning sun and the west sun is really important because, it's entering your eye at a different angle. And I think, like you also might want to do some more table lamps or things like that kind of mimic that level of lighting, just to make it more dynamic. People who have maybe a hard time setting their sleep schedule or, going to bed at the right time and then feeling more alert in the morning. I think, scientists are starting to understand that exposure to morning light's really important to set your schedule. So we want to pay attention to that light that's coming in low, not just everything all overhead.
Yeah. I mean, there have been a lot more studies about the effect of lighting on our bodies, and especially when it comes to phones, like that unnatural light that people tend to have right in front of their face right before they go to bed, and then they wonder why they can't go to sleep easily. Well, you're laying in bed staring at this close to your face.
Yeah.
Right up until the moment you turn the lights out, or sometimes after you turn the lights out.
Right.
So just thinking through how that light affects your body and your mind is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that whole section of your website though. So for people listening, definitely go check that out. I wanted to talk real quickly about how you work with clients to balance their wish lists and good design and ideas versus what their budgets are. I think this is the eternal struggle between builders and contractors and designers and homeowners, is kind of managing that or balancing that, right?
Right.
So how do you handle it? And I'll let you decide who can start on this, but how do you handle when somebody comes to you all these grand ideas and all the stuff they want, but their budget's like this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this is definitely one of the most challenging things that we do. And, we always wish that we just had a magic wand so we could design and then bing, the building would be built. But that's not reality. And especially as construction costs, continue to increase. One of the things that we do from the start is to try to talk about budgets of past projects and what those past projects were about. And, maybe share some, very simple like spreadsheets of, here's how much cost went into foundation and millwork and painting and, just so people can understand what all is going into a project. And sometimes we'll use the, shopping for groceries analogy because it's something that everybody can relate to. And so it's like, say you're going to, make spaghetti for dinner. And you go to the store and you're like, great, $20, we've got it. Spaghetti sauce, spaghetti, some meat, a little bit of salad, we're done. But the reality is you want to buy that nice bottle of wine and, that artisan Parmesan cheese caught your eye. And
You don't want the Prego or the Ragu. You want the gourmet sauce,
yeah,
right?
Organic.
the gourmet sauce. And, before you know it, your, $20 budget, now it's like $50.
Should have just gone out to eat.
So, yeah. So the same thing, happens when we're designing. It's really easy to add all these things to the cart and you don't realize how they're adding up until the very end. And then you're kind of it's a shock.
Mm-hmm.
So we're pretty upfront with people at the beginning. Managing expectations is just part of our strategy to help, manage expectations.
Right.
So we're honest about, if they're looking at a particular type of window system. That's a good example because it's a perfect gauge of what their expectations are for quality, right? Go window shopping and tell us what you're attracted to. So windows can be your basic budget or they can be a very high priced item. And oftentimes when they see the difference, it's somewhere in the middle, like, okay, what is our priority?
Yeah. So, if we're starting the design and we're like, okay, we're going to start working on selections, the window selection can really set the tone and help us work with that client moving forward. And then, we'll try to give choices on things. So, and help people, understand their priorities. So it might be like, well, these windows are really important to us. I'm like, okay, let's make the stair design a little bit more simple. Or
do you really need a double-sided fireplace?
Right.
Yeah.
What is, the detailing of that and the maintenance of that as well is also another thing. It's not just about the cost up front, but the long-term cost of those particular systems.
The staircase is a good example, in my opinion, because a staircase can be very utilitarian. You can have a staircase that's kind of tucked back, that's not an open grand staircase, to where it's just a simple straight up and down. It's not open at all,
Right.
and that's not an expensive thing. But now you slide it into the foyer where it's open on two sides, and there's a switchback, or it's curved, and now that went from a $10,000 item to a $50,000 item in a heartbeat, right?
Does it have like a glass railing system or something where all of a sudden the balustrade is well beyond what anybody would guess that would cost. Cabinets is a big thing. So just reminding like, hey, we're drawing another cabinet. That's another cost that's going to be part of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Built-ins everywhere.
Yeah, like let's not have built-ins everywhere. Have some furniture instead.
Let's do a furniture in a nook there instead. That's where grandma's piece can go.
Right.
Although sometimes, buying the furniture can actually be more expensive. So you also have to understand what their overall budget is, not just for the home, but also for the home and furnishings. Because if they're reusing stuff, that could be a big savings. But if they plan on furnishing completely new the whole house, maybe it is cheaper to spend $1,000 on the built-in and not buy a piece of furniture. So
right.
It's being able to approach it from the big picture perspective, right?
Yeah. So you're saying you can do a built-in for $1,000?
It depends on what the built-in is. I mean, yes, I can do a built-in for $1,000. It just depends on what it is.
We want to see that built-in.
It's a bookshelf.
So we can set expectations. Yeah.
But it goes back to interiors being a part of the beginning.
Yes.
Is like, what furniture do you want to keep, or is this a complete start from scratch kind of thing?
Right.
And is that part of your budget?
Mm-hmm.
You know, is the furniture part of your budget? And is landscaping? A lot of times we will include the not secondary costs, but like outside costs that you don't think of, like, okay, this is the design fees and the construction costs, but then that's for the building. And then you've got the landscaping, and do you want a pool and an engineering and civil engineering, you know? So we try to include that as at the beginning so they have a full awareness of what they're kind of getting into.
Yeah, we had a landscaper on a couple of episodes ago, and you know, he was bemoaning the fact that the landscaping is always like the last thing that gets thought of, and that budget always is the first thing to get chopped because you're at the end and you're like, I can just do the landscaping later. You know, that has to be planned for up front. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with just some grass in your yard and that's it.
Right.
But you know, designing the landscaping is kind of part of kind of the holistic approach to designing the home and kind of what you guys are trying to achieve. And that's not just thinking about, you know, one piece of it. It's thinking of the project as a whole and designing the whole thing for success.
Right. Right. Yeah. So sometimes, you know, we'll do some conceptual landscape designs as we're designing the house, just to make sure that, you know, it's a comprehensive design. People are thinking about, you know, how is that space going to be used in terms of landscape, for sure.
So we were talking about cost and ideas of how to meet the client's budget,
Yes.
and the client's wish list. And you know, inspiration images are really helpful when, you know, with the ideas of, you know, what they'd like or what they're wanting. Tile and plumbing, you know, any area where they're finish and fixture rich is what we call it. So
Yeah.
kitchens, bathrooms, those are, you know, that's why those remodels in particular are more expensive than just a bedroom, right?
Mhm.
Building and construction versus like interior decoration, and like, because you can furnish bedrooms. Yeah. Anyway, furniture can get really expensive, but back to the hard, you can't take it with you kinds of surfaces. So, you know, tile can be $5 a square foot. It can be $50 a square foot, and how many square foot you need. So, you know, can we use this special tile in a small area that has a similar impact that gets you, you know, what you want without breaking your bank? You know, so talking through the design and how we implement those special pieces is helpful, getting what they're wanting and staying within the budget.
When you're planning that stuff from the beginning, it's way easier because again, if you find out at the end that they wanted some special tile or some special thing at the end, the budget can get blown up later on. So if you're aware of that from the beginning, or if you're helping make those decisions from the beginning, it's a lot more successful. But I mean, I find that the selections aren't the biggest cost driver most of the time in the projects. I mean, $5 versus $20 a square foot tile on maybe 100 square feet of tile is not going to make that much of a difference.
Right.
But including like in a bathroom, since we're kind of talking about bathrooms, including a freestanding tub versus just a shower, or those are kind of the bigger items because we're cutting out plumbing labor, we're cutting out a whole fixture, we're cutting out square footage probably. So
Right.
making those kind of larger decisions early on have more of an effect than maybe just what kind of countertops they're getting or what kind of tile they're getting, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And all of those little things add up to bigger things, but it's also the pieces that you don't see. So in a remodel in particular, you know, oh yeah, we want to completely gut it, or it's got old knob and tube if we're doing a 100-year-old home, like, oh, it's got old knob and tube, it needs to be adjusted. So Kathleen is really wonderful at, you know, walking potential clients through, like, so here are the things that you may not be paying attention to, but that we help us understand the overall budget a new roof is this much or about this. New plumbing is going to be about this. New wiring is going to be about this. A whole new HVAC is going to be about this. And when you're looking at an overall budget and all of a sudden a third or 2/3 is taken up, then it's like, whoa, okay, let's rethink.
And we want to, set people up for success down the road. So they're taking care of these things that often come up. Like we do a lot of 1950s ranches, and all the underground plumbing is on its way out. So if it hasn't been replaced already, let's go ahead and replace that as part of the project because it's going to have to be done sooner or later.
Yep, and that could be $5, $10, $15, $20,000 line item depending on what it is.
Exactly, and so it's like we don't want you to do this project and then 2 years from now realize that you have an extra expense. So of taking care of it then because your toilet's no longer flushing.
And some of those things, it's cheaper to do it at the same time. Like if my plumber's already in there doing all the rest of the plumbing and everything's already demoed, it's a lot easier to replace that underground plumbing. Whereas if you do it later, you pretty much, after it's remodeled, you have to tunnel to get to it because you don't want to tear up what you just did. So now it could have been a $5,000 item. Well, now it's a $20,000 item because you waited.
Yeah, and not to mention the disruption to your life.
Right.
Do it when you have control over it. So, thinking about the age of a roof or what's your foundation like, that's more often an issue to consider than not because of our soil is so bad.
I think also kind of drilling down, because people have the budget they tell you. And then they have their real budget. And sometimes that is a hard budget number. And sometimes it's just kind of what they're hoping to spend.
Right.
And they're not completely transparent with you. A lot of times, we uncover that early during the design process. So let's say you present them floor plan A and B and C. And you're like, well, A is, we feel confident this is in your budget. B and C are nice, but, those are $50,000 more maybe. They're like, oh yeah, C definitely. Well, they just spent another $50,000.
Yeah.
And you tell them, hey, well, that's the more. They're like, I know, but we can stretch the budget for that. Then you can kind of get a sense of, this is. They said their budget was X, but it's really probably more like X.
Yeah, I mean that actually I think happens quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons why it happens is as we're designing, people are rethinking their relationship with their house. And so they might be remodeling to stay there for another 5 to 10 years. But then as we're working on the design, it becomes a house that they can stay in for the next 20 years.
They're falling in love with their house.
I know.
Oh my gosh, look at the things we can do.
We've actually have had very, very few of our projects have been sold. And so, so Susannah and I have been working together for 15 years now. And
one of them that was sold, the new clients came back and said, hey, you did this. Can we have you do this other thing? And
nice.
So, repeat clients.
Yeah. So, we have a lot of repeat clients. So, just the fact that very few of our projects have sold is just, people are okay to invest more if they realize they're going to stay longer. And that's part of the design process. And every design process is different and every client is different. The safe approach is to never assume that, what their budget is, but just kind of get a range and start working towards that. There's so many variables, it's the selections. It's who the builder ends up being. Builders have different costs or trades have different costs. There could be a change in the market that drives up cost between design and construction. It's very hard to predict exactly what the cost is going to be. But it's kind of like, we're in big ship. We're leaving New York. We know we're going to leave somewhere. We're going to land somewhere, in Europe somewhere. But we're going to start the trip, right? We're going to get started and see where things go.
Yeah. And this was not a question that we talked about ahead of time at all. So I'm going to put you on the spot. How do you help clients navigate kind of the variety in contractor pricing? Because that's one thing I come across a lot as a builder, that they have a notion, whether it came from themselves or from their architect and designer, of what the project should cost, and then they start getting pricing from builders, and they're like, "Wow, I mean, this one guy's telling me it's 500, this one guy's telling me it's 700, this other guy's somewhere in the middle." How as a design firm do you guys help people navigate that range of stuff that they're getting on your design that hasn't changed, right?
Mhm.
Right. Well, I think the first thing is if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So, if somebody's giving you a really low number, that's just a signal to be very careful and ask a lot of questions.
Did they miss something?
Right.
Mm.
We always have the builders, if we're in a bid situation, even if we're not, the builders and the clients will share the bids with us so that
Yeah.
we can see. And there's another pair of eyes that are more trained in going through
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
to help them navigate. But it's also like business models. There's the guy in the back of his truck that's his office, right? He's got
Right.
no overhead because he works from home. And,
Right.
and then there's, builders who have supervisors and, it's a larger company. So their business model is very different and that can drive the cost as well. you
Yeah.
know?
And, the talent behind the labor
Mhm.
is, we've got, one framer that we've been working with for, over 20 years. And this, the same crew, he's going to charge and you're going to much more and you're going to get a, much better framing job than, somebody else that maybe doesn't have as much experience or is not, so, quality driven in their process. So their numbers might be, one might be 10,000, another one might be 20,000, but
Mhm.
you're going to get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to try to get a handle on what a client's expectations are and how that relates to cost. So if you're saying you want A+ quality, but you're looking for a B price, that's just not going to work.
Yeah.
So, and people aren't always aware of their own expectations. So we have to try to ask questions. Does this look okay to you?
Right.
How about this? Would you be okay if you saw this at the end of your project?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of goes back to the window selection. It helps us to understand,
Right.
what their expectations are. And, we use a car analogy a lot. Like, are you okay driving a Kia? Or do you really want to be driving around in a Mercedes?
Yeah.
So
We have some tools that we provide to owners who are looking to bid or, interview questions, suggestions for, what to look at when you visit a construction site. Some construction sites get really, really messy. Some are, just tidy because that's who the builder is. If that's really important to you, you may see that in the cost, and that may be why you choose one builder over another. And the personalities are also a big deal. Definitely interviewing and meeting the builder, seeing his work and his trades work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this tile guy going to be the tile guy that you're going to bid on my project?
Right.
I want this tile guy because this looks awesome.
Yeah.
So
my
that's
my,
helpful.
my uncle, who I used to work with a lot, used the car analogy all the time. He was a contractor. He's who kind of got me into this, and he'd been doing it for a long time. He always used, well, do you want an Olds 88 or a Cutlass Supreme? I'm like, you have to start using some. And he was using those same car brands even like 2005. I was like, all right, nobody drives those cars anymore. They don't make those anymore. Let's modernize our,
You're losing people.
Let's use like Honda Accord versus,
Right.
Lexus here,
Right. And it's
No,
like,
no knows what a Cutlass Supreme is anymore.
I know. And even, it's like the experience of those two cars, like you can kind of imagine like going car shopping and getting in one and it feels one way, and you get into a really, like a high-end, nice luxury car and it feels a certain way. And if somebody asks you to describe, well, what's the difference? What made it feel different? It's really hard to put words to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think our industry term is fit and finish.
Yes.
And it's really hard for kind of a lay person, a regular everyday person, to understand what fit and finish is in the construction world. But that's what gives you that kind of intangible sense of one thing being better than the other.
And sometimes it's the choice of materials and how luxurious those materials feel, which is something that you can't capture in a picture necessarily.
Right.
Like if you could put a picture of a brand new Honda Accord next to a picture of maybe a Mercedes, and the interior photos on both of them look really nice.
Right.
But if you go sit on them and you feel the material, that's what makes the difference sometimes, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's everything. It's the sound of how the door closes. It's the way the steering wheel feels. It's the, touch and feel of the knobs. So that could relate to, what quality kitchen faucet you have.
Yeah.
It's those sensory things.
Yeah. And so, so tile and countertops and surfaces definitely play a big role in that. But, cabinetry and millwork is a real big thing. Like some people are very happy kind of having what they currently have in an older home, which is a paint grade plywood job built cabinet. But there's a big difference between that and a CNC produced factory cabinet with a UV cured finish and soft closing hardware. From a distance, standing back, they're both cabinets. They both look nice, but it's the experience of operating it that can make the difference, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Last topic before we wrap it up, and this is something that I kind of used to ask in our first few episodes. I used to ask people a lot, and I'm going to start bringing this back a little bit because I like to hear the answers. Because this podcast is supposed to be geared toward homeowners and helping them make good decisions. So I always like to ask, as architects, designers, what is your ideal client? What do you look for in a homeowner? Because we want people to also be good clients, right? So, what to you makes a good client? Besides paying their bills on time and having an unlimited budget,
and an understanding and an appreciation for what it is that we do. There's a reason why we're professionals and we've been in the industry and we have successful projects. They value what we do.
Yeah. We're hoping for clients who are really engaged in the process. Because I think that's, what we have to offer is a lot of collaboration and really getting to know people. And so having clients that are really engaged with us as well.
We like clients who do their homework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, right? So, we're going to ask questions, they're going to answer questions.
Mhm.
They're going to challenge us and we're going to respond to those challenges. So we want that healthy back and forth. That's what creates a, successful but dynamic and also creative project where it's creative problem solving.
Yeah. When I look back on unsuccessful design projects that we've been involved with on different levels over the past few years, oftentimes the clients who were the least involved or the least engaged in the process are the ones that kind of fell apart or never went anywhere. So, we've had clients that would just kind of show up for meetings, look at stuff. Yeah, that's good. Or maybe one half of the couple was very engaged and the other one really wasn't engaged.
Yeah.
But when it came down to the end to get finalize the design, finalize the budget, start construction, they're like, yeah, we're just not going to do this. It just kind of fell apart.
Yeah.
And it's because the clients, they were never really engaged in the process. They never really listened to what we were saying. They were just kind of checking a box, right? So having the collaboration with the client and having them really a part of the process is super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kathleen said, having them challenge us. We attract a lot of questioners, folks that, really, really dive in and are wanting to know more and wanting to learn more. So, we're pretty detail oriented. So that makes us really good fits for anyone who is wanting an engaged process, like a collaborative process.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we want to hear people ask, well, why are we doing it this way? Or how
Mhm.
could we do this differently? Or we thought about this over the weekend and can we look at that one other way? Those those are the kind of clients, well, if you ask for more, you will get more. And for us, those are the best projects.
Yep. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I really appreciate you. It's always great to see you. Tell us real quick for our listeners, your website, your contact information, how they can reach out to you and how they can see your work.
So, well, you can go to our website, www.rdarc.com.
You guys got stuff out there on social media? Yep. Y'all doing
Not as much as we should.
Instagram, Facebook, the
We're too
TikToks,
busy designing.
the TikToks.
I'm just
We
kidding.
are so focused on our day-to-day relationship with our clients that we tend to answer those emails and take those phone calls and make those site visits during construction.
Right.
That's where we spend our time, not so much on social media. Sorry,
Great.
guys.
Oh, great.
But you can find us.
We do have Facebook. We are on Facebook and we are out there.
But we'd rather see you face to face. So if you're interested in, talking about doing something to your house, let us know. We'll come visit you.
Yep. Go have coffee with them and get to know them.
Well, we want to get to know your house too. So let us visit you at your house and we'll walk through and see what we can do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Your Project Shepherd podcast. We will see you next time. If you found us helpful and enjoyed listening, please support us by liking and subscribing here on your podcast platform and also join us on our YouTube channel. We want to continue to bring you high-quality content and expert guests, and your support truly helps us to continue this journey. If you have any questions for me or my guests or any feedback for us, you can email us at podcast@yourprojectshepherd.com. Thanks again.